What's really great too is this podcast is called Unconventional Mindset. And my whole philosophy is to have people think about things differently in order to be successful, right? Like how can we change our mindset in order to become the best person that we can be? And what I love about you is that you've built a business around this and in terms of leadership and how people can think about leadership differently and how it's really more of a lifestyle and a way of being as opposed to just like a set of checklists that people need to follow in order to become a good leader. So that's really amazing. So I'm super excited and pumped to have that conversation with you today. Before we get into that, for the people that don't know who you are, can you just maybe talk a little bit about who you are and the work that you do?
Absolutely. Thank you, Odum. I really appreciate being here and super excited to dive in. So a little bit about me. So I'm a single mom of a 12-year-old boy. His name's Parker. So he's my heart and a big part of my leading light. He's informed me, I think it was 2 weeks ago, that he expects me to build up my business so that he can take it over when he becomes of age. So
no pressure, right?
No pressure, right? No biggie. But no, it's fantastic watching him grow. And being able to have him around not just the business, but the emotional intelligence side of things. It's just been, I'm so fortunate. Other things about me, I like to be active. I have fur babies at home.
What are fur babies?
Oh, fur babies. Like I have a dog and cats.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
I call animals. I call them fur babies.
Okay, yeah.
But that's fair. That's fair.
I was thinking that it was some kind of like you have a young son, that it was some kind of technological thing or whatever that.
Oh no. No. And I like to volunteer. So I'm on the board of directors for Ireland XO, or Ireland Reaching Out, and that's really focusing in on diaspora. So understanding heritage and where we're currently at with regards to our Irish lineage, which I find really interesting because it's a global opportunity, not just for like backgrounds, but the crossover with business and other different backgrounds as well in that realm. So
let's talk a little bit about Intuity Performance and how that, maybe you just give me a quick overview of kind of how that started and what it is that you do kind of in that business.
So basically at Intuity Performance, we're rewiring leadership for the real world. We've been playing around with like our vision, mission statements to continue to build on our brand. And basically the thing that has been really sticking with our leaders is that we're building leadership via a mental gym. And what that means is we're utilizing neuroscience, emotional intelligence, leadership habits, and coaching with hybrid facilitation to really build the strength, clarity, and skill sets that are really needed for leadership that's sustainable in high stakes organizations that are competitive and compliance is required.
Before you started this company, what was your career like before then?
Yeah, so I joke around and I say I'm a recovering HR C-suite professional. I was in people and culture. In multiple different organizations. So anywhere from consulting to construction to transport to IT, nonprofit, for-profit, as well as getting into government's arm when it comes to leading from an HR perspective. So that I found that really interesting because it afforded me to look at different demographics and different types of things that were going on in organizations. And for me, the most consistent thing that came up was that we have a gap in leadership. And so I started doing a bit of research because I'm a curious person and found out that it's like still today $1 billion problem across North America, whether it be because we're not forging the opportunities of proper training and development for leaders in our workplaces for succession planning, or we don't know what we don't know. Like, I really don't think that leaders intentionally get out of bed and think, hey, I'm going to lead horribly today. That's not it at all. Yeah. It's just, there's a gap there. And it's trying to help educate organizations around the value of said leadership. So
yeah, we're definitely going to unpack that because I think you put on some really good points there about how people don't even know how to be a good leader. And that's really something that's really, really fascinating. But before we get to that, just a few more questions though.
Yeah.
So how did you even think of wanting to get into leadership coaching? Like, was there any kind of aha moment that was like, yes, I need to do this, or did it just resonate with you?
I think the latter in the first instance, it resonated that there was a problem that I wanted to fix.
Right.
And I think combined with my strong-mindedness, I had a lot of experiences with leaders where I don't want to use the word bumped heads because that's not it, but I could feel stickiness. Like a lot of my HR peers or professional friends would say, oh my goodness, I'm getting mentored by so-and-so, or I'm getting this opportunity in the workplace and it's so great. And I love HR and all this type of stuff. And I'm like sitting back and I'm kind of like, well, I'm not having that experience. So like I went inwardly first as to like, am I just a horrible employee? Or what's going on with me type thing. And then I realized that one of my superpowers is really noticing trends. And the trends that I could see, I didn't understand at that point in time that it was around internal versus external leadership, like how you lead yourself versus how you lead others. And from there, organically, I would say I did a SWOT analysis, being a self-proclaimed geek, and figured out that the coaching and training development piece really fired me up in a good way.
Yeah. And SWOT is, it's like strengths, weaknesses,
opportunities, and threats.
Right?
Yeah. So it's kind of like a business quadrant thing that you would do. But I did it on myself because I was in a place where I was like in my office asking myself, is this it? And I knew that I'm responsible for my happiness and I'm responsible for my career progression. So I need to do a bit of research or reflecting to see where do I go from here. So I then reinvested in myself. So I took coaching through ICF, or I received my coaching certification through ICF.
ICF is?
The International Coaching Foundation or Federation. So they're one of the certifying bodies to identify with regards to certain standard of ethics, and you have to go through so many different programs and coaching hours, and there's a lot of rigor with regards to getting credentialed there. So I did that, as well as became a DISC behavior assessor, as well as emotional intelligence. So I kind of dove into those areas around like, how do I understand the human-centric sides of leaders? I felt that was really important, but didn't really at that point realize what I was doing with it until, Intuity Performance started to grow and morph into where we are today.
Did you always envision yourself as an entrepreneur? Like you were saying, you were doing this analysis and self-reflection of yourself. Was it because you're like, you said you were responsible for your own happiness. You're like, I'm not an employee. I just can't really work for other people. I just need to find my own thing. Like,
it wasn't so much I can't work for other people. It was the opposite. I want to be connected to people.
Okay.
I wasn't feeling connected with regards to either the leadership upwards or the culture of the organization. Yeah, I always had that spirit. From a leadership perspective, it wasn't out of the gate, I'm going to be a leadership entrepreneur. I actually started a business in my early 20s. I was designing jewelry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with it, won a couple accolades. It was good. And then I had a choice to go down the HR route or continue with the jewelry business. And for me, I was more passionate about learning business and people. So that was kind of like the fork in the road for me. It wasn't until I started getting into the space where it was like, what do I want to do with myself? Then it was like that aha moment came up as to, I want to fix the problem of leadership and help rewire how we develop leaders and therefore lead within organizations.
Yeah. When we talk about leadership and we hear the word leadership, I think there's a lot of ideas that come to mind. And maybe some of these are outdated, like I just need to be the loudest person in the room, or I'm going to be a micromanager and I'm just going to tell other people what it is that they need to do. With that being said, what are some of the misconceptions that people have when it comes to leadership? And for you, how do you define what it means to be a great leader?
Looking at misconceptions first and foremost, the biggest thing that I see is that leaders feel like they need to have all the answers. And it's a polar opposite. Leaders need to be able to, again, connect. And you're going to hear me say connect a lot. I'm going to take a sidebar if I can, because Google had done a research study of their teams as to like, obviously they have a lot of A players, and it was called Aristotle. And so they studied the human behavior within their teams around productivity. as to like what made them such a great team or such a great producer of what they're doing within the organization. And it kind of hurts my heart to say this because I thought it was like DISC styles or emotional intelligence or like all the behavioral stuff. It was connectivity. Like that was the single most thing that allowed for people to have trust, psychological safety in the workplace. It was that connectivity. Now skill sets come under connectivity for sure, arguably. Coming full circle with regards to the connectivity piece, leaders definitely feel like they need to have all the answers or the experience or the skill sets, when in actuality, it just comes down to A, understanding themselves, and then B, ensuring that they know how to connect or plug in to their team members.
When you say connection too, are you talking about like teams that feel like they're almost like their family and they have lots of kind of team building and team bonding, or they just feel safe to be able to talk to each other? Like what is...
That's a great question. That's a great question, because oftentimes we lean into words or gestures of family, and your workplace is not your family. I would actually debate that it's not fair to utilize those types of words because you're creating a psychological contract with your team members and you don't mean that they're family.
I see. Yeah.
Right. So I feel kind of passionate about that stance. For me, it's community. So
that's a much better word. Yeah.
Right. So it's like you're within I'll just use Intuity, for example, you're within the Intuity community. And what connectivity means is that we understand each other's roles. We understand the expectations of ourselves as team members, as peers, as leaders, what have you. And then also too, we understand almost like what I would call the agreements of communication within the organization. And so for some organizations I've worked with, including Intuity, it could be accountability. It could be courageous conversations or candor. It could be transparency and fun. Like, so it's getting to know those cultural or social norms of an organization that therefore establishes the connectivity. That's at like the organizational level. But then you take it into departments, and there's departmental levels, because we know that 9 times out of 10 employees are quitting their leaders or the managers, not the actual job or the place of employment.
Right. So they're unhappy. It's like, oh, my boss is always riding me, blah, 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 whatever. Yeah. It's like, I'm out of here. I can't stand that person.
I'm burnt out. I can't take this anymore. And so it's not just the culture. It's also looking at it from a departmental perspective as to like, okay, what type of subcultures are in there and what type of consistency can leaders offer to ensure that there is connectivity.
If someone's there's a lot of new entrepreneurs and business owners that listen to this podcast. So what can they take away in terms of how they should approach leadership when they're just a small team or just a building team, to make sure that they have those foundations, kind of laid down properly?
Yeah, that's a great question. Just to clarify, if it's okay.
Yeah.
When you're thinking about it from an entrepreneurial perspective, are you still being in the leadership lens or from the entrepreneurial spirit of building your business?
Well, I guess I'm thinking from, how should I say this? Because I'm thinking about bringing on some extra people here.
Okay.
And then how can I create that culture, that community that'll make sense, that'll help me create a place that's going to be a great place to work, that people are going to want to stay and build something, really, really, really good. And so that they can almost see my vision and see my motivation, and just, we can all kind of get on the same page, I guess,
Right.
I don't know if that helps clarify.
Yeah, definitely. So for me, I think about 3 different buckets in short. So 1 is your systems and practices. 2 is your leadership tools and your tool belt. And 3 is the leadership habits that you would deploy within your organization. So when we're talking about systems and processes, it's mixing, again, the human-centric side of things with your operational day-to-day, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're thinking about everything that you want to show your team members or the new employees, it's like, can they identify your core values, and not just what's written on the wall, but do they understand your expectations of how to translate them into how to work together on a day-to-day basis? Right. For a small example. And then there's other things under the hood when it comes to systems that you would pull in to make sure that organically everybody is kind of like speaking the same language and, operating eventually within the same not mindset, but mind space, I would say.
Okay.
What I've seen within organizations that embed, culture with systems is that it organically weeds out individuals that aren't a fit with the organization, or the teams, right? Which is fantastic because at the end of the day, you should be able to have a human conversation if someone is not liking the job or what have you, right? Then from the tools in your tool belt is, how do you understand yourself as a leader? What are your blind spots? What are your superpowers? How do you lean into your superpowers to make sure that your actions and words are aligning when it comes to the culture of your organization that you're trying to create? And then it gets down to the habits. So as a leader myself, I tell my consultants and my team that when I get really busy, I get extremely task orientated. And I ask them to hold me accountable because normally I'm very chatty or I have like a pleasant sentence in my emails. But when I'm, trying to get things done, then it's task orientated. So it can come across as overly assertive.
Right.
So what I've created in my own culture within my organization is my team members can call me out and say, hey, Ange, like, I'm not sure if you're meaning to be super short there. So that's a habit that I'm building to make sure that irregardless of what type of space I'm in, I'm still consistent with my team members so that they know that there is, trust, psychological safety, all that good stuff. So those are just a few examples.
What I'm hearing from this as well, too, is that every company can almost establish their own values. Like there's not one set way of doing things.
Absolutely.
Right? So, okay. Yeah.
I mean, when you're looking to build a team, a lot of times it's starting to think about how do you want the roles to interact? And then how do you want the people to interact? And when you get really clear on roles or lanes, I always say, it makes it a lot easier to speak to expectations and culture and stuff like that, right? Then there's also this argument around culture that your organization's culture is what's going on when you're not there. And I mean, if someone's a new entrepreneur, that's not going to take place, right?
Right.
So it's being cognizant of how do you want your team members to operate with your customers or your clients? How do you want your team members to operate amongst each other when you're not there?
Would it be fair to say that you would want a culture where that if the boss is there or not there, that everyone still behaves almost in the same way? Like, because I guess if I have a team, it's like I leave, I don't want people to be like, oh, finally, he's gone. I can talk about the stuff I want to. I guess I wouldn't want that.
No, not at all. Not at all. And if I can experience share. So what had taken place was I'm a non-technical founder for a new thing that we'll talk about later that's coming out into the market. And so as part of that, I had to hire some of my tech people, my tech peeps is what I call them. Yeah. And I wanted so badly for this individual to understand that I'm a great leader. So a little bit of ego was in there, albeit, as well as I have my ish together. Like I have all my stuff together. So this is how the culture works. This is how this works. And like I overdid it to the point where because I can read the room and I have high levels of self-awareness myself, I could see that I was actually making this person uncomfortable. Okay. Because it was too much, too fast. And you can't expect team members to just trust out of the gates.
Right.
And I've read it, I teached it, and then I was living it a couple of years ago. Right. Yeah. So one of the biggest learnings for me is around the fact that it's a bit of give and take. Right. So it's being able to build the relationship at a pace that your team member is comfortable with. Right. Not what you want. Right. Because for me, I was like, okay, I'm going to get this person all set up. We're going to build trust and we're going to have all this stuff in place and they're going to be an A performer. Yeah. And it was awkward. Yeah. And it was me that made it awkward for the first couple months until I just kind of sat back and then just showed them how I led. Yeah. And now, like I call it glimmer moments. Now I see glimmer moments within the tech team when we do our huddles on a weekly basis because we're talking about wins. We're talking about roadblocks. We're talking about resources and what we need. And so I've slowly then started to integrate back in things around expectations or consistencies or, things that I want us to talk about, including, our core values.
Yeah, tech people are, because I guess I'm one of them. So we're a finicky bunch because we like to do our stuff, and it's almost like, let me put my headphones on, get to work, and just leave me alone.
Yeah.
And, maybe we'll have our huddles or whatever it is, but that's it. So yeah, I could see how that could be maybe a little overwhelming if you're just throwing that on someone the whole time. But I mean, that's really great for you too, because that's a learning process for you because like you said, you've never done tech before or haven't built anything.
No.
So it's almost a completely different type of person that you have to manage and that you have to lead. So
I'm just having this epiphany now, Odum, because I work like Intuity Performance serves tech people.
Oh, that's
right. Which is really
Yeah.
ironic. So it's like tech, biotech, health tech, life sciences. Like we work with engineers, we work with, biochemists, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's odd that I'm able to speak to it at depth. And then practicing myself, I have to do my own habit reps, I guess is what I'm trying to exhibit.
That's really, really interesting. So just one last question around this. Is it something that I don't really need to worry about at the start to be like, oh, it has to be this way right from the get-go? Because if we only have one or two people, isn't that something that maybe we can just let that grow organically in terms of the culture and the values that we have?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes and no is my short answer.
Okay.
So I'm definitely a believer that having consensus building within your company is really important. So being brand new, does there need to be a lot of structure like the corporate Googles? And no, absolutely not. However, it's extremely important to understand that team members need to be led. Right? Because the other learning lesson that I've seen with entrepreneurs, including myself, is that if you go out to a macro management style, meaning like they got it, they'll understand, they'll come to me and talk, that's not the case at all.
Yeah.
And so it's trying to find that fine balance of what structure should I have in place versus what structure can I co-create with my new team members. I feel like it's more of an art and a dance than anything else. So I would suggest having like bare bones in place. Like, what are your deal breakers?
Right.
And it doesn't have to be super structured, right?
Yeah.
Again, it just could be like a one-pager agreement to start with.
It could be like, this is how I want people to engage with my customers.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful example. And also, how do we engage with each other? What are the working hours? Are they going to be working hybrid, remote? So setting those kind of like baseline expectations, I think, are really important up front.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Okay. So you're talking about, you work with a lot of biotech companies and a lot of different people.
Yeah.
So when people are coming to you that they want to have develop great leadership skills, what is it that, like, what makes them stuck? What is it that they're coming to you saying like, yeah, I know that I need, better leadership skills. Like, why are they stuck?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a large question. My response to that is not why are you stuck, and how can we help you understand where are your leadership strengths and where do you want to grow? Because oftentimes we have like a 0 to 100 thought process, right? Like we've been taught growing up in academia and what have you that it's either good or bad.
Right.
We either got it or we don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
And leadership, it's not that way at all. Oftentimes it's, what does 75% look like? What does 85% look like? So in Intuity Performance, what we do is we actually sit down with leaders to understand what are your pain points? What can you do without? What do you need? Where do you want to go? We're asking a lot of questions to be curious with leaders so that we can understand not their pain points, but where they want to grow.
Right.
And then we back that up through behavioral assessments or emotional intelligence assessments. And then we can help them thread and understand themselves. And I feel like that's the largest aha moment in leadership, is that once you understand your own makeup and what tools you have in your backpack, because we all come with stuff, right?
Yeah.
Good, bad, and different. Then you're able to then build upon that within kind of like that proverbial leadership mental gym.
do you come at these people from like they have to do their own personal assessment and you almost have to put a plan together specifically for them? Like, I guess a question could be, what's the difference between like, here are the known things that we know make good leaderships versus I'm going to take you as an individual and figure out how I could customize our solutions to you?
It's a hybrid approach is the short answer. So we do one-on-one within organizations from a leadership development perspective, as well as groups. And so when we're thinking about it from a group perspective of leadership, yes, there's 21 different core competencies, or you could argue more when it comes to leadership. However, it's speaking to key stakeholders and decision makers as to what's working, what's not working, and almost doing a micro diagnostic to understand what are the key priorities that we want for our leadership team, and then building from there. When we're working one-on-one, you're absolutely correct, Odum, in the sense that we are co-creating goals with individuals. So it's a bit more of a one-on-one conversation after we receive all of the reports and have a debrief. And then it's identifying what does success look like and what could be our measurables to ensure that they're getting ROI essentially.
Yeah. That's really cool. Sorry, I'm processing this stuff because I'm learning a lot here too, which is really great.
It's okay.
So you said earlier today about being a good leader and having great leadership skills is knowing that you don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
And so when I think about leadership, I think people need to open themselves up to being vulnerable, right? So like you have to admit that you don't have all the answers.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that back. Yeah.
So absolutely. And that things like having honesty and empathy and being able to have those honest and open conversations. I think those are really kind of important things. So, but when you're coaching people, I would imagine that being vulnerable is a very difficult thing for people to do. So how do you get people over that barrier of understanding that they need to be vulnerable in order to become the leader that, you know, that they can be?
Yeah, that's a great question. Before I answer that, I realized I didn't come full fruition with my previous answer around what makes a good leader. And for me, there's different quotients essentially. And what I mean by that is everything that you're describing are sub skill sets with regards to emotional intelligence or agility or flexibility. It's like our makeup in the sense of how do we understand, almost like looking at it as a wheel. How do we understand how to communicate? How do we understand how to motivate? How do we understand ourselves and then therefore our team? Because it's a huge responsibility to lead for your team, not for your team and with your team versus just leading a team or managing, right? Jumping back to your other question, when it comes to vulnerability and how do we set people up for success to be vulnerable, it's a lot of, I would call it pre-work from a clinical side of things. And what I mean by that is it's expressing to our clients the ethics that we operate on. It's expressing the confidentiality. It's expressing other things like how do we work together and how do you want me to work for you? Because my job as a coach isn't to just data dump. My job as a coach is to do multiple things from anywhere of being an accountability partner to a sounding board to a conduit to your growth, right? So it takes time to build trust as well as showing that my actions and my words are in alignment with regards to anything that's going on. For example, I work with a lot of C-suite leaders. And so when they're talking about things, they know that I've been hired by the CEO or another decision maker. And the first question they ask is, well, how much of this stuff are you going to tell my employer? And my response every single time is like, I will lose my license if I tell your employer anything.
It's all confidential.
And it's you that needs to tell your employer.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's about, again, I'm just a conduit. Your relationship is with your CEO or with, your HR department, whomever you report to. It's not a coach's role to report into progress, regression, chronic issues. Do I report on trends? Absolutely, for sure, because companies need to know and see value. And I show that to my coaching client as well. So they see it. Again, transparency.
When people hire you, then is it like a company will come in and say like, I want to give all my whatever department heads coaching, and then
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not, and do you ever have it where an individual come to you as well and be like, hey, I guess it's
Definitely.
You take anybody. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
So when a company comes in and says, we're going to give all our department heads coaching.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're saying is that the individual conversations you're having with those people, you're not reporting back to their boss or whatever saying, oh, this guy's a terrible leader. He's stuck. Okay,
No,
okay.
not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
Oh.
Because the intention is with the organization, we're identifying what type of skill sets we want to build within the team or what objectives we want to hit from a leadership perspective. And then from there, our job is we approach it from a hybrid approach with group. So some of it's facilitation around leadership. So we're dropping seeds and then we're having real conversations with the team so that they can, again, go from looking out from blind spots to building strength to applying it to the workplace.
Right. Do you ever talk to the people that you're trying to build into better leaders? Do you ever talk to their, the people that are working under them to get a sense for what they think that person is lacking?
That's a great question. I've done it for a couple clients. It's just dependent on the employer as to the time, bandwidth, and expectations.
Right.
But yeah, it's fantastic when you can get that feedback. The other way that we go about it from an Intuity perspective is we then will follow up with a company. And a lot of times we tend to keep longer relationships with our clients for sustainability and leadership training within their departments. And what we see is their different engagement scores will increase. Or from a case study perspective, the leader themselves will come back and report and be like, I used to do this and that was a donkey move and now I do this.
Yeah.
So there's different ways to gauge it, I think is what you're getting at.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's very interesting. When somebody needs to be maybe self-aware in terms of like, oh yeah, I'm actually kind of being a douchebag or whatever it is, case may be, how important is it for someone to have that self-awareness to be able to be willing to change?
Yeah. I'll start with this. So Harvard Business Review did a study and they studied over 500 leaders across multiple genders, et cetera. And of those 500 leaders, 88, I think it was, % had said that they're self-aware, meaning that I understand how I impact other people. I can really read myself, et cetera, et cetera. Because there's internal, external self-awareness. The funny stat that came back was that in actuality, 16% of those 500 people were actually self-aware.
So they weren't even self-aware about their own self-awareness. That's kind of funny.
Yeah, right. It's ironic. And I strongly believe self-awareness is a huge key to unlocking the rest of it when it comes to leadership skill sets, emotional intelligence, resiliency, all of that type of stuff.
Yeah,
for sure. Because if you can't identify how you're feeling or your beliefs or how you're acting or your triggers, then it's really challenging to lead anybody else to do the same.
So how do you know if you're self-aware as a leader?
Yeah, that's a great question. So oftentimes the way that you can organically test it is if the way that you think about yourself is in alignment with how other people see you, right? And a way to ask that as a leader is like, hey, I'm working on my communication skills. I think that I'm really jovial under pressure. Odum, what do you think? Like, how am I presenting myself when I'm under pressure? And you could be like, yeah, that seems to track. Or you could be like,
no, you flip out all the time. What are you talking about?
You're insane. Yeah. So, there's different types of organic conversations that you can have in the sense of feedback.
Yeah.
To understand where you're at. Also, assessments are really helpful to understand.
Yeah. I'm even thinking right now, just off the top of my head, about my family, because I have 2 kids, 2 teenagers and wife, of course. I'm just thinking like, maybe I should talk to them about how good they think I'm doing certain things as being a father almost. I'd be like, hey kids, what do you think of when I'm, maybe doing some kind of discipline or something? Like maybe I think I'm totally fair and everything. And they could be like, oh no, you're crazy. You go way too far or whatever. So I don't know. Yeah. So maybe that's kind of a little test that I could do on my own to see how self-aware I am.
Yeah.
Especially if I don't have any employees to test that on. But
that's valid. Absolutely. And I appreciate that approach. Oftentimes I'm trying to think of how I set it up with Parker. He's in a place now where he can look at me and he's very comical. So he could be like, so it kind of seems like you're tired here, but I'm not really sure if this is tiredness, like he'll name it. And it's hilarious because there's like an emotional intelligence thought process. You have to name it to tame it. And creating that safe space, especially for children, to be able to express themselves. So even if I don't agree with him, or think that his joke is funny in that moment, I allow him to express himself, and then I validate or devalidate. I shouldn't say devalidate. I validate his perception.
Yeah.
You know? And the other thing that has come out of that is that he now can express himself to me. So it's reciprocal now.
That's like a high level thing that your son's, and he's only 12?
He's 12.
Because I read this book, It's Never Split the Difference with Chris Voss.
Yeah.
Have you read that book?
I've heard of it. I read
the
the
FBI
brief.
negotiator or whatever.
Yeah.
And one of the things he says is like, when you're talking and negotiating with somebody, just almost like mirror back what they're saying and then put their words back to make them like say yes and say like, that's right or whatever. So if you can get that connection with somebody. Yeah. But that's just amazing to hearing that your son's even doing that. That's crazy.
The hair on my neck kind of stands up hearing that statement, because it's not that we want to manipulate people.
Oh, of course not.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, and I know what he was trying to say, because like when you're negotiating, it's me versus you.
Right.
When you're leading or when you're parenting though, it's how do we ensure that we're still in sync?
Yeah. That's a really good differentiator there.
Yeah. So like I think of it from the perspective of mirroring is another form of understanding. And so my son having ADHD, instead of me getting like super frustrated and being like, oh my God, I've spoken to you 8 flipping times, or like me taking it personal and being like, you don't respect me, you're not listening to me. We've just co-created a rule that whenever he's asked to do something, then he mirrors back. Okay, what I think I'm hearing is this. And I will say yes or no. And then, things can get done in a way that's a lot less tense in the household, both for myself and for him. Yeah. No, that's really great. So I think that's could be really translatable to people that are in leadership positions. Absolutely. To talk to the employees, say like, this is how we're going to communicate. This is how we're going to have these, like you said, these are my expectations and this is what I want from you, and go from there. Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. So if someone is going to be a leader for the first time, what I guess are maybe some smaller daily habits that they can do in order to kind of establish what they want for their team? It depends on where they're jumping off from. That's where my mind goes.
Yeah.
When you're thinking generically or generally speaking as building leadership skill sets, it's things like consistency, curiosity. So asking more questions than making more statements. Like we talked about earlier, mirroring things back to ensure understanding, and checking in with team members frequently to understand what they need, and or how you can assist them with prioritization or the workload.
I feel like a lot of people don't see themselves as natural leaders, right? They're like, I wasn't Martin Luther King. I'm not going to come up with these great speeches or whatever. I can't really lead people. But obviously you're proof that people can learn how to be leaders. I mean, you teach people and you see it time and time again that people do become leaders. So if somebody they have that mindset of, I do want to become a better leader. Like where should they start?
Within.
Oh, geez, that's really just So maybe I don't even know how to ask that question right, but I guess it's like I want to become a good leader. Yeah. I have a small company. I'm running a small team. What is it that I need to do in order to get myself onto the right path to become a good leader?
I should have been more specific. I was trying to be tongue in cheek. They should start within themselves.
Oh, okay. Okay, I see. Yeah, okay, that makes perfect sense now. Okay.
So like the way that I would define leadership is if there's any codependency on any one person in an organization, you're a leader.
Okay.
And what that means is, in its simplest form, is that if you're a project manager, all the people that are within that project management circle or change management circle or whatever it is, you are influencing and or leading some portion or part of it. It doesn't mean that they're your direct report, but it means that it's calling you up to have leadership skills to be deployed and applied to ensure that the project management piece is rolling out consistently and effectively.
I wanted to ask you this. So you have a podcast. It's called The Human Side of Leadership.
Yes.
And I told you this earlier, but I'll tell you this again. congratulations, because you just reached, I think you're over 150 episodes now, which is amazing. So congratulations for that. You talk a lot about that on that podcast, about empathy, emotional intelligence. Obviously you said that phrase here as well too. And just for people having a deep understanding of the people that are around them, right? So if someone's new to these ideas, and because this is even kind of new to me, what does that actually look like on a day-to-day basis of having that empathy, of having that emotional intelligence?
So empathy to me is a subset skill of emotional intelligence. Okay. So when you're thinking about emotional intelligence, depending on the theory, it's like 4, 5 quadrants, right? So we talked about self-awareness. So there's self-awareness and social awareness. Self-awareness being within, social awareness being with, how do I see you interacting with me? And how do I navigate your emotions and your actions? Then there is social management, which rolls into what I just said around self-management in part, and self-management. So how do I navigate my own beliefs, actions, and behaviors? So those would be the kind of overarching thoughts around what emotional intelligence is. So basically, it's a dual loop in the sense of, how do I understand myself and manage myself? And how do I understand the people around me and then therefore influence the people around me in a positive way? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think it does. And maybe I'll just try to clarify this with maybe another question. So can you maybe describe how that would show up as a skill to somebody that is a great leader? Like,
go a little bit deeper. Absolutely. So as a skill set, it would be the leader has the ability to decrease tension within the department by clearly and consistently communicating what's going on, even if they don't have the answers, right? The leader is able to snuff out frustrations, to understand and be curious and figure out what's going on with the team member that's not productive that day for that quarter, right? That normally is. Emotional intelligence exhibited in the workplace is leaders that can ask questions without making assumptions on the tail end of it, right? So I guess those would be 3 real world applicability cases.
It makes me think of this job that I had, one of the first jobs. This is kind of maybe a little bit of a tangent, but I always never know if it was me that was the bad person or what the employer. But so I had this job, and from the minute that I sat down, first day, I was like, oh, this isn't for me. It was really bad. So there was only 4 of us, and this was tech stuff.
Yeah.
And they had put in all of these procedures and all these things that we had to do. So we had to track our time for every 15 minutes. So it's like, if you were doing something for 15 minutes, you'd have to stop and be like, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. So they tracked all of our time. So even if we went to the bathroom for too long, it's like, oh, well, you're in the bathroom for too long. What's going on? Do you have a medical problem or whatever? I'm like, I can't believe this. So I lasted 8 months until they basically fired me.
Right.
And my whole thought process the whole time was that these guys don't know how to run a company. Their policies are just really ridiculous. And I'm just always really unhappy. I always feel like I'm being watched. Like I don't feel trusted in how I'm spending my time. Is that maybe more of a me problem of not being, self-aware in that this is the rules that they put in place and that I should just follow them? Or like, am I just not a match for them? Or were they like, do you know what I mean? Like in terms of leadership, were they bad leaders or was it just me not fitting with their leadership style?
My short answer is it depends. Like the questions that are coming up in my mind when you exhibit that story is, did they project that is their culture within their organization during the interview process and the onboarding process? And if the answer is yes, then it's maybe you had thought that it would be totally different or a different definition of what time tracking is, right? Or a different definition of management oversight.
Right.
If they did not, then it would be a miss for the employer to be able to be like, okay, well, this is the culture that we want. This is what we're doing. And that's it. They need to advertise appropriately, right? Yeah. So it's kind of like when you're thinking about it from that perspective, immediately also when you said, I knew as soon as I sat down, it wasn't for me. this story pops up in my mind, and I don't know if you know Brene Brown, but she is.
The name sounds familiar.
Yeah, she's well known in the sense of emotional intelligence and specifically vulnerability. So she's done a lot of studies out of U of T. She's written a lot of books. She's a speaking engager. She has her own leadership concepts. Wonderful, wonderful woman. And Brene, if you're listening, hi, love you. And so anyways, she had expressed this story. So her husband's a doctor. She's a researcher. And it was kind of like a comic relief story, but it really speaks to mindset in the sense that she woke up one morning, and I'm going to like make up my own words, but she woke up one morning, she was super cranky, and Steve, her husband, always used to make her coffee. And for some reason this morning, he was rushing himself, grabbing the kids, taking them off to school. He didn't make her coffee. So she had to make her coffee. So she was annoyed by that. And then she was like, this is going to be a crap day. And 2 minutes later, she made her coffee. It spilt all over her. And then the rest of the day just kind of like slid like that, right? And when you were saying, as soon as I sat down and thought this wasn't for me, I immediately thought of that story because it is what you make it to be.
Right.
Right. And so, and I don't mean that from a warm and fuzzy perspective. It's actually science in the sense of what you're projecting and what you're thinking. You're then going to wrap that personal bias around it. I've had the same experience where I felt like the leader was way too assertive. In hindsight, knowing what I know now, they were insecure and they were very much a fact finder, which doesn't align with a visionary person like me.
Right.
Yeah. So it wasn't that they're a crappy person. They just had a different approach or different behaviors. And the same thing goes with companies. The other caveat with this too, I think, is that, again, most organizations want to have a great organization. But if they have an oversight or investors that are expecting them to report on certain things, then they may feel like their hands are tied and they don't know how to do it. So there could be different ways to massage that, I would think. But my short answer, again, would come full circle to it depends on if you're just looking at your side of the story or their side of the story.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, because obviously as an individual, you want to look at your side of the story and be like, oh, of course they were bad. But yeah, but thinking back now, it's been such a long time. I don't lose sleep over it, but it's just really interesting to think about. And I guess for me, it's just something to think about as I move forward here in my career and my journey, to try to always think of, like you said, just putting people first and thinking about people, thinking about how I'm interacting with people and just trying to build the culture that I want to build, that I know I want to be around it.
If I can say this, the other thing that's circling for me, I don't know why, I'm just going to throw it out there, is what if you looked at that scenario, not so much as a bad boss or a bad culture, but rather that was a signal for you that their principles didn't align with your principles.
Yeah.
Right?
That makes sense.
And the other thing is that you had the learning opportunity that extremely rigid environments are not in alignment with you.
It's just not for me.
Not for you. Full stop.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Yeah. Because I hated it.
Well, I mean,
so bad, but yeah.
There's a rejection that comes with it, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's when, so like being in HR, the worst part of my role was always letting people go. And I found that over the years, having more human conversations was more necessary than following policy. Because at the end of the day, I had employees or past employees that would come back to me and be like, you know what, that conversation that we had, I landed the best job ever, you know? And so for them to sit down and say to you, hey, this isn't working and there's a form of rejection there, right?
For sure.
And we've all had it. We've all felt it in some circumstance, whether not getting the job that we wanted or being let go from a job or what have you. At the end of the day, again, I think leaders have a huge responsibility to think about not just the transactional side, but the human side. And then on the individual receiving that, it's I'm enough, but for a different company. If that makes sense. No,
it makes perfect sense, because just because you're not a fit there, it's better to just kind of let go and find a thing that really fits with you. Right? Don't stay in a position where you're going to be miserable.
And there's no shade.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You're a good person. You're just not the right fit for this position.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. Are there limitations to what you can do as a company legally in terms of the conversations you have with people?
Yes.
Like when you're firing them? Because you can't almost just be like, this isn't right for you. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, do you have to be careful where you got to toe the line between having the honest conversations and how you can protect yourself as an organization?
Absolutely, 100%. So in Nova Scotia, specifically where we're at, there's the Nova Scotia legislation that we have to follow from an Employers Act perspective, as well as human rights. And then there's also Disability Act and Safety Act. So it's very contextual when it comes to letting someone go. When I say having a human conversation, you still need to make sure that it's a legal conversation, that it's above board, I guess. And once you're comfortable with injecting that type of language, then it can still be a human conversation.
Right. Yeah. Just within the bounds of what's, I guess, legally acceptable.
Yes.
I guess. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For sure. Like I would never, ever even think of doing this, but I couldn't look at you and be like, you're not a fit because you're not like everybody else.
Oh, yeah.
Like I'm just giving an extreme example. Like you just can't speak like that. Or you couldn't be like, almost like the side table psychologist and be like, well, I think that you need to get this and that and do this and that because you're not a fit. And you know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah. I think that the honest approach around it is to identify in a quick manner what's not working, and also identify thanks and gratitude for what contributions the employee did provide, assuming that it's not egregious, of course, because that's a totally different conversation. Mm-hmm. We're just thinking not a fit, right?
Yeah.
And then asking them if there's anything that you can do to help them as they go into their next steps, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's very contextual because you're not going to give a reference for someone that was extremely poor towards the organization, right? So there's boundaries there.
Yeah. When an employee is found to not quite fit with the company, is that more of, I think your answer is going to be, it depends, but is it more of a fault of the leader or is it more of a fault of the individual?
It depends.
Yeah.
I don't think that because a lot of these questions are like, is it this or is it that?
Right.
And
you were saying that at the beginning where we're always kind of binary and here I am kind of asking these questions.
And that's okay. That's okay because it allows me to think about how do I explain this in a manner that can be binary in some circumstances, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It could be a situation where the employer has an opportunity to look inwards within their organization. And what I mean by that is systemically, what operations do you have in place? Is this a trend? If so, what trend are you seeing and what needs to be adapted and or changed?
Yeah.
From the individual perspective, it's like reflecting on, okay, well, what type of past feedback did I have? Not just from my direct supervisor, but other employees, and taking some time to reflect and identify, is it not a principal fit? Like we talked about earlier. Is it my own skills that have an opportunity for growth or my attitude? And kind of go from there.
We were saying before, leadership is something that you can grow into and you could become a great leader. But I also think there's something on the employee side where you can grow and become the best employee that you can as well.
Absolutely.
Because you want to grow your own skills and whatever too, right? So,
100%.
Yeah.
Again, regardless if you're a leader or not, all of these skill sets are super important, right? Because when we have higher levels of emotional intelligence or communication, it's less stress, increased engagement, it's less negativity thinking or those types of habits, more productivity and innovative, right? And the list goes on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that. So let's turn the mirror, I guess, a little bit more into yourself in terms of your experience and growth as a coach and entrepreneur. So I guess what has been the biggest breakthrough for you in terms of, becoming a coach?
The biggest breakthrough for me in becoming a coach is around letting go of control. Now, bear with me when I say this. Because when you're in an HR position or organization, there's care and control. Like, what you can do and what you can't do. And in coaching, that's not it at all. Like, it's the polar opposite. So it's being able to ask questions that maybe don't land, or, getting into the thought process of, instead of thinking of what's the next step with this person, just being in the step with the person.
Yeah. Was that a challenge for you of be
Yes. Yes.
Because now you again, I guess that goes in with having the empathy, right? Just being in there with that person and just
Absolutely.
kind of sitting in it.
You can only coach as far as you've been coached. And so I've made it a point to ensure that I have my own mentorship coach off and on throughout my career at Intuity Performance. And it's making sure that I'm not stagnant or complacent and positively challenging myself so that I'm showing up as my best coach self for clients.
So you're being coached right now?
Yeah. Absolutely.
I guess that makes a lot of sense, right? Because you're coaching other people, but as you're saying, you're still growing, you're still curious, you're still wanting to grow.
Yeah.
So then why not get that information from that person that's done it for 20 years, 30 years or whatever? Because at the end of the day, you probably want to be in their shoes at some point. Well, not in their shoes, but to have their knowledge and, their experience and all that stuff.
Yes, 100%.
When it comes to coaching and when you're dealing with leaders and you're, walking them through the whole process, is there one thing that you have to keep repeating over and over to these people? So another way to ask the question is is there the one thing that you would really want to nail into people's heads about what it means, to be a good leader?
Yeah, that's a great question. So two things come up for me. One is within the coaching relationship, it's your responsibility as a leader to come to the table with the things that you want to work on. So oftentimes what happens is we're operationally driven, and being a leader is not separate from the operations on a day-to-day basis. And understanding who you are as a leader is not separate from that either. So understanding the self-awareness, getting feedback, and bringing those things to your coach are really important so that you can see substantive growth.
If somebody is, again, I guess I'm going to go back to this person who's just kind of new and they want to learn about leadership.
Okay.
If there's a piece of advice or something that you can give them in terms of how they could kind of change their mindset in order to be in that framework of being really open to becoming that leader.
This is going to sound super simple and it's super hard. It's understanding, what is my current mindset? Where do I want to go? What gap do I need to fill? And that all in itself is the exercise of growing as a leader, is, figuring out that kind of gap analysis. And then, okay, what do I do with this information? It's great that I read this book, by Covey or by Brene Brown or by whomever. But how do I apply it to myself? What does it mean to me? And I think that is the largest opportunity that leadership needs to tune into to really be a substantive leader in today's market.
You said earlier at the beginning that the opportunity within leadership, I think you said it was $1 billion industry, or there's $1 billion. So what is it that makes you say that? Is it just that there's such bad leaders that's how much productivity is just being drained from these companies? If we could be making that much more money if people were better leaders? It's
not just productivity. It's also thinking about it from the perspective of your hires, right? So if you hire someone, statistically speaking, in past, it was 2 times their salary that it costs you if they leave. Nowadays, it's upwards more of 3 times their salary.
Oh, wow.
So let's just say someone's at $50,000 a year and you hire them, they're there for a year and then they leave because they don't like the management style or they don't like the culture, the environment, what have you. That's $150,000 at the door, because then you have to rehire, retrain, and then recalibrate.
And that retraining takes either some other people that they need to take time to do this. So it's just this compound negative effect.
And then also too, when you think about tech industries, they're highly competitive. They're highly innovative. It's about getting to the next finish line or that next iteration or release, right? So if you're reinvesting in your leaders to grow, you're reinvesting in your team, which saves you time, money, and expertise.
Yeah. I know I've been in positions before where you're at such a great job and someone comes out and says, hey, I'll pay you this much more money to come work for me. It's you know what? I like where I'm at right now. I don't want to risk losing something that I enjoy doing. I enjoy the people that I'm working with. I don't want to risk that for just maybe some more money. What if I don't like the team? So it's a risk on that person's part. So I think that goes back to what you're saying. If you put in great leadership and just have an overall great place to work, that's just going to help you retain those people.
Absolutely.
And then just build that culture and build whatever you need to be a successful business.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Which is amazing. Ange, thank you so much for being here today. Absolutely fantastic conversation.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that we haven't talked to today that you'd want to mention?
That's a tough question.
There absolutely doesn't have to be. Absolutely doesn't have to be.
I don't think so. I think I would just positively challenge the listeners out there, to look at their own leadership style if they're a leader, or their leadership skill sets, and challenge themselves to grow. Like, figure out your gap analysis.
And where could people find you if they want to learn more about the work that you do?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. So our website's www.intuityperformance.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, as well as Coach Maria. And we're on Instagram under Intuity Performance.
Perfect. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very much appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
This was a blast.
Likewise.